I'm Papa Geoff, and this is OG Radio. You know that disagree doesn't mean dislike, right? No, really. It's OG time in Houston, Texas, around the country and around the world. Welcome to the Papa Geoff's America podcast. Continuing the conversation one podcast at a time, a conversation about what's going on in America, a conversation about politics, government, world events, stuff and things. With differing points of view, we are all inclusive. Everything from far right to far left and everything in between. Things that you want to talk about with commentary, exhilarating guests, and what would a day be without Papa Geoff's classic old guy humor, right? So with one sort of kind of good eye, a very, some would say, unique sense of humor, and definitely a face for radio, here's Mr. Here We Go himself, the G-Man, PG the OG, Papa Geoff. Hey guys, it's Papa Geoff here. It's time to continue the conversation. Guys, we got a real good one in store for you today. On Wednesday, November the 4th, I sat down virtually with Xander Zweig. Xander is the co-host of the worldwide podcast Xander and Stone. Now, the really cool part is that Xander is based in China. That was a really fun interview for a couple of reasons. One, due to the time difference, it was late in the evening for me and early in the morning for him, so just about anything was possible, right? And two, he's just a really cool dude. I can't wait to have him on again. Now, I also got to say that at times our Zoom internet connection got a little wonky, but I'll also tell you that Xander has one of those radio theatrical booming voices that can overcome just about anything. I know you're going to enjoy it. Always a great time when Texas reaches out to our international colleagues, and especially when they're fellow podcasters. The Papa Geoff's America program continuing the conversation, one podcast at a time. It's 78 degrees and sunny at the OG Radio Studios in H-Town, Space City, the city with no limits, Houston, Texas. And they said only Nixon could go to China. Nope, Papa Geoff's America is going to China. This is the Papa Geoff's America program on the OG Radio Network. Xander Zweig, when we come back.
Say their names. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Sean Reed, Tony McDade, Alton Sterling. Say their names. Somebody please say their name. Philando Castile, Brent Thomas, Lauren Ahern, Michael Smith. Say their name. Please. Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Terrence Crutchard, Tamir Rice, Mike Brown. Say their name. Freddie Gray, Antonio Martin, Walter Scott, Jamar Clark, and Sandra Bland. Please say their name. These are just a few that have lost their lives. Say their name. Somebody please say their name. A person cannot be religious and indifferent to other human beings' plight and suffering. Say their names. Please, say their names and don't forget.
Everybody, welcome back. It's Papa Geoff, and our guest today is Xander. I'm gonna try this, and I hope I'm not gonna butcher it. Zweig, with the emphasis on the CH.
You got it. It's Zweig.
It's ZWEIG, and it's Xander with an X. I nailed it. Okay. Xander is a fellow podcaster and just an amazing guy. I got to tell you, we talked off air for a little bit, and he has agreed to come onto this show and to share a lot of stuff that's going on, guys. This is the probably the longest distance interview that we've had. Xander is in China, and so if we stretch the string on the two tin cans, we're definitely going to lose our connection. So we definitely don't want to do that. But
We got that
Xander's
awful long piece of string. How long is a piece of string? Well, it's enough to reach from Texas to China.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Xander is the co-host of the Xander and Stone podcast, and he's also a voiceover actor and artist. Been involved in the theater arts for years. Is a former educator. I mean, his CV goes on and on and on. And so, but he has an awesome accent, guys. I know he's the one that doesn't think he has the accent. It's amazing.
I definitely don't have the accent. It's everybody else that's got the accent. This is just how I speak. It's all y'all that have the accent.
All y'all, yes.
All y'all.
In Houston without the H, yes. Oh, Xander, thanks so much for coming on. It's great. And tell us about your podcast. Tell us about Xander and Stone.
Well, before I get into talking about my podcast, I just want to thank you for having me on your show. You approached me on social media. We had done a bit of backwards and forwards talking on Facebook. And when you invited me onto the show, I was really quite flattered because your show is par excellence, sir. So it's a real honor to be able to meet with you and talk with you today. But going back to your initial question, so the Xander and Stone podcast, hosted by myself and my colleague Stone, who is actually in Arizona. So we dance around the time zones quite regularly on a weekly basis. And our podcast is essentially a look at the paranormal. And we know that there's a lot of paranormal podcasts out there and some really big names in paranormal podcasting. But I think something that we offer that's a little bit different is that we look at the science versus the supernatural. So as an example, if we look at something like hauntings, we look at how does science explain hauntings? What could be the scientific explanation for somebody who might be experiencing a haunting? And then we also look at the paranormal or the supernatural side of that. And having the pleasure of visiting many countries in my lifetime and being exposed to a lot of different cultures, I kind of approach it from an anthropological point of view, where I want to see what do different cultures and different belief systems say about this type of a paranormal experience. So like a good example is sleep paralysis. And almost every single country in the world or every single culture in the world has some sort of a supernatural or paranormal explanation for what sleep paralysis is, because it's obviously a very common human experience. So we try and kind of balance the science versus the supernatural with a bit of anthropological, and we try and do it all in a bit of a lighthearted way. So we're not scaring people in the middle of the night.
I think that's great. And people are open to that. They're wanting the information, and you're putting it out in a lighthearted yet serious yet able to back it up. And where people aren't just saying, "Nah, I don't buy that."
I like to think so. You know, the funny thing is that Stone and myself, I tend to cover all of the supernatural and the paranormal stuff, and Stone brings the logic of the science and the scientific research behind it. And the irony of that is that Stone has actually had more paranormal experiences than I've ever had in my lifetime. So it's almost like we kind of switched roles for the podcast, where I tend to have more of like a lean a bit more towards trying to find a rational explanation for a paranormal experience or encounter. And Stone has actually had a paranormal experience encounter, yet she brings it, she tries to rationally explain it away. So it's almost like we've put each other on the hot seat of, our experiences versus, the way we approach things, and kind of role reversed it. And I think that kind of adds a little bit of an interesting element, because I'll speak about the paranormal, and Stone will be able to give an example of something real life that maybe she has experienced, and Stone will speak about the science, and I will be able to back her thing up. So we've got a bit of a bit of give and take and a bit of role reversal on our podcast sometimes as well, which I think makes it a little bit different and a little bit interesting.
I think that's great. I don't know if I've ever really had a paranormal experience by definition.
Sure.
I can say that some years back in one of my varying careers, I was driving a public transit bus, and it was in the middle of the night, and I was in an area that obviously the route was about ready to end for the night, and I came up to a rather rural area, and I could see ahead that there was someone at the bus stop, and I said, okay, I'm going to go pick this person up. And I can't even remember if I had anybody on the bus, but when I got up to the bus stop, nobody was there. And I thought,
and how did you explain that? I mean, did you think that they just ran away, they ducked away? Do you think that they vaporized into thin air? You know, what did you think happened?
that's kind of what I was thinking. I asked several of the other drivers if they've ever had an experience like that at that particular stop. I was thinking maybe there was maybe a traffic accident, or maybe someone was killed at that location sometime in the future or something like that. And I never did get an explanation for it, but I mean, I was absolutely positive that there was a passenger there, and then when I got there, they were not.
Well, you see, okay, so what we can do then is we can put this out to all the paranormal investigators who are out there in Texas. Did this happen in Texas? Where did this happen?
No, sir. It happened in Reno, Nevada.
Okay, so there's, and Nevada is well known for being like a UFO and a paranormal hotspot in the States.
Right.
So, there's a lot of paranormal investigators and paranormal investigating teams around those areas. So I would suggest we put it out to any listeners who are part of a paranormal investigation team to maybe reach out to you and find out where that bus stop was, and let them go and poke around there with a sharp stick and see what they can find. See if anything yelps back in the dark.
Absolutely. They can definitely get in contact with me at papageoffusa.com.
There we go. We're putting it out there, Papa Geoff. We're putting it out there.
I like it. That was kind of weird, and you just kind of went on. And as I told you earlier, I was a paramedic for 10 years in Reno as well after that particular career, and I had been with people when they passed away, and that became kind of weird as well. And I mean, it's almost like you could, and I know varying medical professionals have different things that they've described, but to be with someone whose soul is there, if you will, and then is a very unique experience. And to me, it wasn't scary. To me, it was an honor to be the medical professional that was there and charged with their care at the time. My first wife was a nurse for almost 40 years, and she said that she had been in rooms with people that, and certainly a cultural thing, because I know that you and Stone will get into the different cultural type of things with things that happen in the paranormal. And in one particular, I believe it was the Filipino culture, that if someone's going to pass, they open the window, and that way the soul can escape the room that it's in. And
That's quite right. And it's something that you see in a lot of Asian cultures as well. Not just necessarily the Filipino cultures. You'll find sort of very similar traditions in a lot of the different Asian cultures, that they have to make it possible for the soul to leave the body, to leave the room, to leave where they are. And it's kind of a twofold thing when you ask people about it. It's obviously so that the soul can move on to the next life. And there can be a lot of traditions and rituals around doing this. Things that you'll provide for the departed soul in their afterlife. But as you said, they would like maybe open a window, they'd make the space, open so that somebody's soul can leave and move to the afterlife. And they have to be able to exit through literal exits. And what you would then do as well is, in some of the Asian cultures, is you would go to crossroads. So you'd go to wherever the nearest crossroad is. Maybe there's an intersection close to the apartment where the person passed away. And you would burn offerings to them at the crossroads, because their soul might get trapped at a crossroad, because not knowing which direction to go in. So in many of the Asian cultures, and I see it all the time here in China, is at certain parts of the year, either around specific festivals for the dead, or around the anniversary of a death, or around a significant, holiday that is maybe related to the person, whether it might, maybe not a holiday, a specific event that's maybe related to the person. So whether it was their birthday or the anniversary of their death, or a wedding anniversary, or whatever it might be, families will gather at crossroads, and they will burn offerings. It's usually in the form of money that is printed to look like paper. So essentially paper money, but not actual paper money. and also clothes, paper clothing. And they will burn these offerings at the intersections to send them over to the afterlife, because the departed soul would need these things. And I take a little bit of a joy in the idea that there's some sort of currency in the afterlife, that you have to send them money, which implies that there are shops and that you have to kind of buy things in the afterlife as well. So, I've kind of got this vision of an Asian afterlife where you can just pop down to like the paranormal 7-Eleven or the ethereal 7-Eleven and go and pick up like a can of Coke and a packet of chips or something.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't have to wear masks, right?
There we go. Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
And then if you look at a lot of the other Southeast Asian cultures as well, particularly places like Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, outside of a business or outside of somebody's home, they will have like a mini, I'm going to use the word, I was going to say effigy, but that would not be correct. Like a model sized, either a temple or a house. And it's essentially, about the size of what you would say a doll's house is. And you'll find these on pedestals at the front door of either a business or somebody's home. And these are used to trap spirits. And essentially the idea is that, spirits don't necessarily have a very good spatial awareness. So they would see this little house at the front of your front door. And rather than entering into your house, they would enter into that small house. And that small house has then been blessed by, whether it be a Buddhist monk or some sort of, ritualistic blessing that would be able to contain this ghost. So rather than having the ghost appear in your home, it would live outside in this little house that you've put outside the front of your business or whatever. So there's still a lot of superstition and ritual around things like death and the afterlife and all those sorts of things in Asia. It's a very rich tradition, very rich cultures here.
I think that's very interesting too, because I was not particularly brought up in the church in the States. I would probably qualify with my folks as a C&E-er, a Christmas and Easter. And then later in life got more into the fundamental Christian beliefs and such, and not the Bible banger, if you will, but still, and went to church for a number of years. And now that I've been doing the political podcast, I've been taking a lot of heat for my political views from some of the church folks, if you will, that, well, you're heading Marxist socialist, Papa Geoff. You think that healthcare should be for everybody. Yeah, I do. Duh, we're the only country that doesn't do it. And
Right.
I don't want to turn this into a political thing, but they've actually looked at me and sent me messages and called me. And when did you, one of them actually, I'm going to put it out there. One of them actually asked me, when did I turn my back on Jesus?
Oh, wow.
Okay. No, but where I was going with that was that this has actually prompted me to say, you know what, I need to look into some other things and get some more knowledge for myself. And people that push what their belief is and theirs is the only belief is wrong, and to me is wrong. And especially in the States where we are a melting pot, and everybody, unless you're an indigenous person, a Native American, you came from somewhere, whether you or another generation came from somewhere. So say that you're right. So anyway, this is an exciting conversation for me, and I know my wife is dying to hear what we're talking about, because she follows the paranormal stuff as well.
I mean, just going back what you said, I mean, like politics and religion for some reason have always been very closely intertwined. And I think that goes all the way back to like the days of the Holy Crusades and things like that. It's very difficult to kind of separate politics and religion for some reason. I'm not quite entirely sure what the reason is, because I'm maybe not terribly politically inclined. But is it such a terrible thing to think that maybe all religions are looking to achieve the same thing, just calling it by a different name? I mean, basically everybody, every religion is striving for peace, and that we must all be nice to our fellow man, and don't commit heinous crimes like murder. And are we stretching the idea so much to say that, whether it is Christian or Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or Buddhism or Hinduism, we're all kind of trying to achieve the same thing. Let's all just live on this planet and get along with each other, for goodness sake.
Wouldn't that be a good thing? But now, Xander, you're applying the common sense rule.
Oh, we can't do that. We can't do that.
No. Heavens. So, Xander and Stone, do you publish once a week or a couple of times a week, or what? How do you guys do it?
You know, we go for once a week, and unfortunately, I have to apologize to all of our listeners, your wife included, that this week we did not release an episode because I suffered from the most shocking allergies on the day that we were recording, and I was breathing down the microphone very heavily, so it wasn't a very pleasant sound. So we had to take a little hiatus this week, but we'll be releasing early next week. So we release on a Monday in the US time, and this is where time zones really work to my advantage because it's Tuesday when I'm releasing on Monday. So I've essentially got a whole 24 hours to edit and everything to get everything together before it's released, and it's still released on Monday. I record on Monday, and I also release on Monday 24 hours later, which is fantastic. So I'm working from the future. So we release on once a week on a Monday. And then every so often we get inspired to release another little mini episode during the week. And that's often when either Stone or myself have independently done an interview with someone. I've interviewed psychic mediums. Stone has interviewed intuitive counselors before. And just, according to maybe like time differences or availability differences, we haven't been both been available to do the interview at the same time. So we kind of go off on our independent tangents. And Stone does what we call the Stone exclusives. And I do what's called a little Zanny-sode, obviously Xander episode, a Zanny-sode.
Love it.
And we do sometimes release, an extra episode a week if we've got one available. Or if it's coming up to something like Halloween and you know that there's an awful lot of listeners out there who are just craving the paranormal content, we think, okay, well, give the people what they want. And then we'll release another episode. But generally it's once a week, yes.
That
was
awesome.
a really long answer to get to once a week. I took the scenic route.
No, that's okay because I can relate to that because people ask me something like that and I can't. One word answer. If someone says I have a one word answer or a 2-word answer, there's something wrong.
There's something wrong. Yeah, it doesn't make good listening if you're just going yes, no in the background.
No, I always have to elaborate, and my wife calls it mansplaining. She hates it. Oh well, that's great. So you just explained it. That was going to be my next kind of bullet point. But interviews and does yours? How about conspiracy stuff? Does that kind of play into what you guys get into on occasion?
Yes. Look, I mean, conspiracy stuff does kind of move outside of the realm of the paranormal, but there are often conspiracies that tie in with the paranormal. So I think one of the most famous ones is David Icke and his conspiracy, for lack of a better phrase, that the royal family are a reptilian race.
Yes.
That kind of, I think the paranormal is a very big umbrella, and there's a lot that you can kind of squeeze under that umbrella. So things like the conspiracy theories, they do feed into them. If you look at something like the conspiracy of like the Illuminati or Freemasons, and there's a lot of kind of ritualistic people claim things like devil worshipping or, invoking certain spirits and demons to be able to get their work done. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of tie these things in. If you look at a conspiracy theory like the 5G theory at the moment, there's a lot of conspiracy around 5G. You can even tie that into the paranormal. There's always it's somewhat tenuous link that you can really unpack that will allow the conspiracy to fall under the paranormal umbrella. We have not yet so far touched. There's a couple of things we haven't touched quite yet on our podcast, and they are on the calendar. They will be coming in the future. One of them is conspiracy theories, and the other one is things like UFOs. And the reason, I'm dead keen. I follow the UFO, and extraterrestrial, news and updates and things like that. I follow it quite avidly. And it was one of the reasons why I got into podcasting in the first place, is because I have a fascination. I'm quite convinced that we're being visited by, other races, whether they be interdimensional or other planetary. But there's a reason we haven't broached that specific topic on our podcast yet, is because it's just such a mountain of a topic. That I am honestly a little bit intimidated by it still. I have to really structure how we're going to do those episodes. We're going to have to do them over like a course of a themed series of just UFO related topics, because there is just so much out there. That kind of falls under the paranormal umbrella for us too.
It's coming though, and I definitely look forward to that.
Yeah. And then there have been a couple of topics as well. There's a few that are on our calendar at the moment. when I look at the projected topics that we're going to be covering for the episodes coming up. And I kind of snicker to myself because I think, how the hell is Stone going to explain that one with science? There's a few things that I just go, there ain't no way she's going to find science for that one. And yet she never fails. She always manages to arrive with something concrete. And I'm always quite blown away and impressed by it.
That's awesome.
But
That's awesome.
Stone's ability to be able to incorporate all different types of sciences. So I think when we think about science, we think of things like, like things like quantum physics and, like the hard sciences. But we forget that it also includes things like social sciences and psychology. And there's a whole lot of other different things that you can incorporate into science as well. So it's not necessarily just like lab tested. There can be things, like I said, with psychology or the social sciences. Social sciences is a form of the science. So that can all be included under the science umbrella when we're looking at the science versus the supernatural.
What's the strangest thing that you've covered? That's probably a tough one to answer. What's
a tough one? I like the challenge. I think we recently did an episode on shadow people and shadow beings. And I think that was one of the most interesting ones that we've covered. And one that I would say was quite disconcerting to do research on as well, because, and again, this actually kind of comes back to science. While I was doing the research, obviously, you end up going down the rabbit hole and reading all sorts of weird and wonderful stories on Reddit and various websites that are devoted to these topics. And one of the things that I read about in my research about shadow beings and shadow people is there's this very infamous shadow being called the Hat Man. And it's something that Stone actually has a personal account of as well. And until we had started discussing it as a potential episode, she didn't even realize that other people were talking about this shadow being that seems to be wearing some sort of like a top hat or, like a bowler hat or something. And it's one of the most widely reported shadow beings in the world is this guy with a hat. And there is a Native American, first peoples tribe that live in, I'm going to butcher the information now. It's slipping my mind. I forget exactly whereabouts in the States that they are. But there's a Native American tribe in the States that live on a reservation, and they attribute a very high number of teen suicides that have been happening over the past, decade. They attribute it to this Hat Man, this shadow being called Walking Sam. And they've got all of this. They say he's one of the most ancient shadow beings. According to the Native American tradition, he's one of the most ancient shadow beings in existence. He's also one of the most, malicious shadow beings. And what he does is that he basically psychologically affects people by convincing them that they're not worthy of life. They put these kind of depressive thought cycles inside their head, and it's all the work of the shadow being. And as I was doing this research, my skeptic kicked in. And the first thing that I thought is that, this is a group of people that do not have access to mental health care. And, it kind of triggered a lot of conversations with people on social media as well. And people who hadn't necessarily listened to the entire episode, but we had used the idea of this Walking Sam as kind of like a promotional point. Is a shadow being responsible for teen suicides on a Native American reservation? And that triggered a lot of political conversations amongst people about, what they have access to and what's provided for them, and big corporations not, and all these sorts of things. So the first thing I did was to encourage people to please listen to the episode, because that is something we actually address during the episode, is do they need access to mental health care? But part of the research and part of what I discovered is that it was not just the teens who were claiming that it was this Walking Sam, but it was the tribal elders were claiming it. There were the parents were claiming it as well. So you get stuck with this very kind of interesting, conundrum of, we can provide mental health, but if your ritual and your belief system says it is something specific, and you can bring in the idea of like maybe somebody who's a very devoutly Catholic who believes that they're possessed by demons. We would like to get them psychological help. We'd like them to see a counselor or see somebody who can help them. But if they truly believe that what they need to get better is a priest, then do you give them the priest, or do you force them into mental health care? And to me, it was the same thing that applied to this. If their belief system says that it's, the specific demon and they need help ridding their tribe of this specific demon, do we give them what they want? Or do we say to them that, no, your belief system is wrong. What you need is this. And it's just an interesting kind of paradox or conundrum to be stuck in, is when do you honor somebody's traditional belief system, and when do you for lack of a better phrase, force on them modern medicine and say, no, what you need is psychological counseling? Or do you try and kind of find a middle path where you're a bit of both, find a Native American counselor who can address their belief system as well as bring in ideas of modern medicine and psychological counseling and therapy and things like that. So, even in something like the shadow people, where you're talking about something very abstract and very paranormal, they can have some real world implications in that. And it really gives you pause for thought.
Very interesting. That was a good answer. And that's
Thank you.
That's an interesting subject. I have that particular subject on what's the program called? Coast to Coast.
Yes.
And I've heard them talking about that, and that's interesting. So I'm going to go ask my wife about that, and we'll see what she can do. I remember seeing in your listing of episodes the Hat Man, and so I'm definitely going to
have a listen. Go and have a listen.
I'm definitely going to do that. I want to ask you one other question.
Go ahead.
I learned this from one of the podcasts that I listened to when I first met you on the group, and I can't really remember the exact circumstances behind it, but why would you? It was something like, "Don't dye your purple llama."
Don't dye your llama purple. Do not dye your llama purple. Yes. Okay. So what we've got is we invite the listeners, because Stone and I, we get carried off on tangents, and you probably know this sometimes when you're kind of going on a tangent and you're really in the zone of what you're talking about, you'll sometimes say things where you think like, where did that come from? And don't dye your llama purple just happens to be one of those. So what we've got is we invite the listeners who, if they enjoyed a specific thing that we said, maybe they found it, interesting or funny. We invite those listeners to send us one of their favorite quotes from a show, and we turn that quote into merchandise. So we'll get it printed on a t-shirt, printed on mugs, whatever it might be. So we've had a couple of submissions from a few folks. We did an episode on comets and cults. We did a End of the World series where we broke it up into 3 parts. And one of them was about pandemics and prophecies. The other one was about comets and cults. And one of the things I said on that episode was sneaky culty bastards. And that ended up being like a whole range of t-shirts. So we now have the sneaky culty bastard collection. And we named the collection after the listener who sent in the quote as well. So it's called the Renee collection because Renee said she'd like that on a t-shirt. So I was like, let's make it happen. So there's the don't dye your llama purple, which is generally good advice for life. Now, when I was in my teens, I was quite punk, and my late teen years were around the turn of the millennium. So I was into things like raves and going to clubs and parties, and things that teenagers do. And I'd inherited from my grandmother a llama-haired jacket. And I even to this day I can still remember photographs of or seeing. I have these like kind of images in my mind of my grandmother wearing this llama-haired coat, and it was an awful beige color. So I'd inherited this from my grandmother, and I decided that what I was going to do is to make this beige llama-haired coat something a bit more trendy. I was going to dye it purple so that I could wear it to my raves and my clubs, and I could look super cool. So I went ahead and bought some purple dye, and I, left the jacket soaking in a bath full of purple dye for a couple of days in the hope that it would. Turns out that llama hair coats and purple dye don't really mix very well. And after I had let the dye dry on the purple llama coats, and it was looking quite fantastic. It was very bright purple. I put it on for my weekend of partying, and off I went to the club. And through the sweating and the heat of being inside of the club, I don't know if it was a reaction from the chemical in the dye, but essentially I started having purple dye was just running all the way down my body and down my clothes. It was basically this llama hair coat was sweating out the purple dye. And then as the evening progressed, I started noticing clumps of llama hair just dropping to the floor. And my purple llama hair coat was shedding. And as you made your way through the club, you could kind of follow the direction I'd been going in, like Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs. You could follow clumps of purple dyed llama hair through the club and find me. And by the end of the evening, it was a rather rancid looking jacket. And so what I learned from that is that llama hair and purple dye don't mix. So whatever you do, never dye a llama purple, because it's not going to work out.
There you go, Papa Geoff's America. You heard it. Don't dye your llama purple.
Never dye your llamas purple. I don't know if it's just llamas. I haven't experimented with other animals, but I don't plan to in the future either.
No, I think you'd probably be safer with the UFOs
I think so. And in my, when I speak about these things, I often wonder about, the people who are out there who are very anti-wearing fur. And I just want to, clear my name there. I do not wear fur. I do not buy animal fur products. In my defense, this llama-haired jacket was probably about 30 years older than I am. And it existed a long, long time. So I think that once I dyed it purple, it kind of just given up on life. It was just like, I'm done. I've done my time. I'm out.
Well, it was a family heirloom too.
It used to be, and now it's just swept around on the floor of a nightclub somewhere. So.
That's great. That's great. How do people find your podcast?
Okay, so you can obviously go onto any of the podcatchers, things like Apple and Spotify, or pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can look for Xander and Stone. Please be sure to spell my name with an X. It's Xander, not Z. So Xander and Stone podcast. You can also visit our website, which is a lot easier to remember. It's xspodcast.com. And of course, all of our episodes are listed there. And if anybody wants to connect with us on Instagram, it's also XS Podcast. So you can pretty much find us anywhere.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and visiting with us and sharing with us. Awesome. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. Guys, we've had to postpone this particular visit for several different times because of things going on my end. And we definitely appreciate Xander staying with us and volunteering his time to come on and share with us for sure. Our guest today has been Xander Zweig. Got the CH in there. And from the Xander and Stone podcast. Awesome timing. Thanks so much for coming on. You guys know how to get a hold of him. And I hope you'll come back and see us sometime for sure.
I really hope so. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll be sitting across the table from you when everything's cleared up in the world and it's safe to travel again. Who knows? I might just pop over to Texas and come and have a cup of coffee with you and chat down a microphone.
A cup of coffee and a Whataburger. Absolutely.
There we go. There we go.
All right. Thanks for coming on. Hey, guys, this is the Papa Geoff's America podcast. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us today for the Papa Geoff's America program. The Papa Geoff's America program is recorded in Houston, Texas at OG Studios and is a production of the OG Radio Network. Check out more episodes of our podcast at papageoffusa.com and please subscribe at subscribe.papageoffusa.com or wherever you get your podcasts. We're on all the major platforms. Your home for Papa Geoff's America is our website at papageoffusa.com. That's where you can check out more episodes of our podcast, check out the OG blog, contact us, and link to all of our social media. We want to hear from you. Your thoughts, comments, and suggestions are what make this program go. So you can send us an email on our website, or you can call or text us at 281-940-6980. Message and data rates may apply. Remember to wear a mask, stay home if you can, social distance if you can't stay home, wash your hands frequently, and take care of each other. And always, always, always practice. Disagree doesn't mean dislike. Thanks again for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing you next time when we continue the conversation, one podcast at a time.